firstly, I'm really excited to invite to welcome everybody to the first event of the City Entrepreneur Network for 2021. We have got an incredible panel lined up today, and we just felt like the best thing to cover, given that it was our first event, is basically where to start. So our very first event is going to be covering off, how do you start a business? How do you go from thinking about being an entrepreneur to actually being one? I make it sound like there's really not a lot in the middle, but there is going to be an awful lot. So we're going to cover as much as we can there. In terms of the sort of structure, we're going to have about 40 minutes or so discussion with the panel, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions at the end. For people who don't know what City Entrepreneur Network is, we are a society within the City University of London, very closely associated with the business school formerly known as CAS. So we're a mix of alumni, current students, business folks, VCs, all sorts of people interested in the entrepreneur startup space. And we've got all sorts of different social network handles that you can join in on. So let me just post these for you here. So we'd love to continue the conversation beyond the event today as well. So just very quickly, in case you don't know who's on the committee, today we have Claudia, who is joining us from a train in Vienna. She is the president of the Entrepreneurship Network. We have Onno, who's in the background. He's being our tech guru extraordinaire. There's myself and Charles, and he and I are going to be moderating today's session. So we're still getting people coming in, but I think now would be a great time to kick things off. So very quickly, let me just look in the chat and see where we've got folks from. So we've got people focusing on finance, on entrepreneurship, both in the UK and in Europe. Apparently the chat should be working now, so if anybody wants to type questions, please do. If you find that there are still challenges, then just please send them to me, because we want to make sure that we've got loads of questions for the panelists later. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our three panelists, Paru Radia, Nasri Atallah, and Sharon Lee Thoney, today for this fantastic panel. Let's start with them introducing themselves to tell you a little bit about their own entrepreneurial journey, all of their pearls of wisdom they're sort of thinking about sharing, and especially why they wanted to join the panel today. So I don't know who wants to go first. Feel free to just start talking. Maybe spend like a couple of minutes just introducing yourself, and we'll go from there.
Should I go first? I can go first. Hi everyone, my name is Paru Radia. I'm based in New York City. I am at this very minute sitting in London. I graduated in '98 and was in the corporate world for a while, but I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I hit a glass ceiling in the corporate world and thought, well, now's a good time. So I started my first business in 2009. It was in the product space, ethnic giftware. It was like doing in my opinion, I've not done an MBA, so I don't know, but it felt like doing a live MBA. It was just as stressful, just as expensive, and I had to hit the ground running to learn everything. Wasn't really enjoying the products that I was selling, but I liked having my own business. So I left that, started another business. I had my own brand of watches, imported it from China, distributed it across the US, got my product into 400 stores and an Australian distributor. And 2 years in, I got bought out by some private investors. And then I went on to consult for other businesses because I felt like I was doing things and seeing things that other people weren't. And I accidentally fell into that because I was showing people different ways of how to be a more efficient, productive entrepreneur, and the ditches to avoid and the hurdles to jump over. I then joined a productivity consulting firm because life's difficult as an entrepreneur. So I got a job as a COO, and after a lot of soul searching reflection, I had a look at all the skills I had and experiences I had and what I enjoyed, and decided to go it alone again. So I now have my own consulting firm, helping executives, consulting for executives in the corporate environment, helping businesses with regular consulting on being a fractional COO or CEO. And the bit I actually enjoy the most, which is why I'm here, is taking people from the corporate world, or any world really, and turning them into entrepreneurs. So I offer a business in a box service, everything you need to know and do for the foundational parts of starting your business. And the reason I'm here today, I was telling the tech team in the green room before I started, is I really want to make a difference, and I really want to help people. I know that sounds cheesy, but I kind of can't help myself in the fact that I hate wasting time and I hate wasting money, and I don't like other people wasting time and money either. So if I can avoid someone having a train crash, then I will. So I'm here to like help you stay on track so that I don't have to watch you crash, basically. I don't want to do that. That's my story.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And yes, no, nobody wants to crash. So cannot wait to hear from you.
I can go next. I'm Sharon Lee Thoney, and I am founder and CEO of SLT Consulting, which is a boutique digital marketing collective that I had established about 2.5 years ago. My professional experience is I've been working in marketing for about 20 years. So I started when I was 5, just kidding. I graduated from undergrad in 2001, worked in advertising and marketing for about 7 to 10 years. I can't remember exactly. About 10 years. And then I went back to get my executive MBA and did that for 2 years. So worked full-time, went to school on the weekends, did a whole bunch of other stuff. My life kind of at that time was also very interesting. I was newly married, expecting a baby. So doing all of that while getting your master's degree was a lot, but I think it prepared me for entrepreneurship. And then continued to work in the industry for about 5 to 7 years after that, before deciding to branch out on my own. My initial idea was actually not to scale a business in any way. It was really to leave my 9-to-5 job, to be honest. So I found myself working really hard. I was just doing a lot of things. I was teaching on the side. I was taking on consulting gigs also outside of my 9-to-5 job, and just networking a lot, and was just kind of like, you know what, I would love to just not have a boss anymore. I would love to find out whether or not I could sustain this on my own, and to be my own boss. So I exited off of corporate America, I'm going to say, started my own business and scaled that pretty quickly. So the irony is that after about 2 years, SLT Consulting was acquired by Fiverr. And part of that acquisition is that I now am a full-time employee at Fiverr. So I often say I've come full circle. I left the 9-to-5 to start my own thing, and now I'm back to the 9-to-5 life again. I'm here to talk to you guys because one is I love meeting people that are just at the beginnings of their journeys or just trying to figure it out. Because like Paru said, my own journey was one that almost feels like it was a little bit not unexpected, but at every turn, I just had no idea what would happen next. And in those adventures, often found myself not really knowing who to go to, and also just kind of not having a set of rules to follow. And any insight I can provide, any questions I can answer, any books I can suggest, websites to suggest, things like that, I'd be happy to do that, as well as, to talk to anybody afterwards as well, one-on-one, just for random one-off celebrations or anything I can share. So that's why I'm here.
Too many unknowns, and tips and resources I think will go down the tree. So looking forward to those. And last but not least, Nasri.
Yeah, so I'm a British-Lebanese writer and producer. I'm also one of the co-founders of Last Floor Productions. I've done a few things, I guess. Started in working at the UN. This is a long time ago now, around 2002, 3. Then did some work in oil and gas analysis from a geopolitical perspective. Then worked at a private bank. then got into advertising, started writing more, eventually ended up in a startup. So I wasn't an entrepreneur there, but I was more of a kind of early stage employee and in-house entrepreneur as the company grew. So I was there for 7 years. It was a French-Lebanese startup. So that's where I had kind of a lot of my first experiences of, and we worked as a kind of agency, and we would do joint ventures with some of our clients. So we worked as like kind of co-entrepreneurs with them. So I had a lot of experience of the VC space and like funding and everything that can go wrong and everything can go right with the company during that period. Left that a couple of years ago, have been doing much more kind of creative work in the last few years. And about a year ago, decided to start a film and television production company focused on Arab-led stories. So great timing, started the company right at the beginning of the pandemic. It hasn't been that bad actually. So I might actually give some, insights on like how you can keep something going while the world's falling apart.
I mean, who doesn't need that tip? Yeah, essential. Well, thank you for all of those introductions. They're fantastic. So everyone knows who you all are now. So for that, Charles, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, maybe I can start with the first question. So how did you guys know that you were like ready to become a founder? Like, is it like a lifestyle, an attitude kind of thing? Or is it rather when you have like enough connections, experience in a particular field? Or is it like in particular education that you followed? So can you elaborate a bit on that one?
Anyone want to jump in? Should I jump in?
You can jump in.
It's funny because on Zoom you always feel like you're like, I don't know, there's no cues to see who should be talking first. I guess you don't know when you should be a founder or entrepreneur. I think it's kind of, I don't have kids, but I always ask friends who have kids, they say, oh, you'll never be ready and you'll never know when it's the right time. And I feel it's kind of the same. There's just a moment where, like I mentioned, like I'd been in a bunch of different industries, had never been happy with, like formal structures within corporations, never saw myself evolving, was never really particularly happy. So I think one day it just clicked during a conversation with a couple of friends. We were all in the same place and it clicked, like this is for the most recent venture. So I think it just kind of creeps up on you while you're being dissatisfied by other things. Maybe today it's a bit different because there's all these examples of like very successful entrepreneurs and it's a desirable thing. And so maybe it's more of an obvious path today, but I still don't think it's that like evident, like what you're supposed to do when you first start out.
Yeah, I read a stat once, and I don't even, it's so funny. I shouldn't quote stats that I don't remember, but it was some really high percentage of founders that ended up starting their own businesses during a layoff or during a crisis. And very often, even in my own journey, as I've met other entrepreneurs, I've noticed that that's true. Like either, and it's not always a crisis, but sometimes it's a life change, right? A lot of women tend to offboard from their day jobs when they have a family or when they just are looking for more flexibility. A lot of other folks might be pivoting in their careers, or especially during COVID, a lot of people have lost their jobs, but a lot of people have started businesses during this time too. And I think there is something about feeling a sense of just dissatisfaction, but I almost want to turn that into a positive, which is seeing an opportunity. So sometimes you don't always control when that happens. Sometimes life just gives you new opportunities for better or worse. And I think it's in those moments where if you've ever had an idea at all, I always wanted to create that widget. I always was curious about this one connection. I always, I hate the way my coffee tastes. I'm just wondering if there's like a way we can infuse a different flavor into it. Look for those opportunities because that's the moment. And I think that's when you're just going to know.
Yeah. For me, it was different each time. This is my fourth business, and it's been different each time. The first one was, oh, doesn't that sound like a good thing to do? The second one was an opportunity. The third one was, well, that was fun. I'd like to be rich. And this one was because I'm truly passionate about what I do. And the other question I have for you is, well, what does being a founder mean to you, and why would you want to be one? Is it for the money? Is it for the opportunity? Is it because you're so passionate about the product? Is it because you're bored? Is it because you're done with working for corporate America or England or Europe? There are so many different types of entrepreneur or founders. So I don't think there's a straight answer to that question.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Because like I hear from a lot of people that they say like you need to be experienced when you like have an idea and pursue that idea to start like a business. So the most thing that they always say is, yeah, you need to have like your amount of flying hours because you need to have the experience.
So I have something, I actually wrote something on LinkedIn the other day about having a tandem buddy. If you don't have the experience, just hook yourself up to someone who does. It's like, the post was something about how I jumped out of an airplane in Australia from 14,000 feet, and the free fall was exhilarating and scary. But I was attached to someone in tandem and I landed on my feet. So if you don't have the experience, be open to the learning and find people who are willing to help you. And don't be shy to ask questions. Like Sharon's here offering help. I'm going to be around. I'm sure Nasri is too. Take advantage of it. Like ask people questions and get the help. People like helping. It feels
good. Thank you very much.
So sort of building on that topic, Sharon, you're like, if you've got an idea, like write it down. But like, what if you don't have an idea? You know, what if you just know that you want to be your own boss? And like, how do you identify like where the white space is? How do you come up with ideas in the first place and just find what that idea business is going to be?
That's a great question. That was one that I had struggled with myself. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I was clear. So this also isn't my first rodeo. I've, done other things, but I didn't even think of myself as an entrepreneur until I went back and thought about all the things I had done. So if you've ever been a babysitter, you're an entrepreneur. If you've ever mowed the lawn for somebody, you're an entrepreneur. If you've ever worked for any kind of hourly wage where you were representing yourself in that situation, you started your own business. You could have run a lemonade stand when you were 5. You were an entrepreneur in that moment. And I didn't connect those dots until now when I'm actually doing it for real in the real life. But I had also looked at other things that I had done that I really enjoyed. So I had a yoga teacher certification and I was teaching yoga at different studios. And that was highly entrepreneurial. I didn't see myself as one at the time, but I love that because I loved being able to choose which studios to work with. I loved being able to choose what kind of classes I wanted to run. I loved being able to touch a whole group of people in the work that I was doing. So I knew I wanted to be my own boss. I knew I wasn't an inventor. I knew that I didn't have a patent for anything. I mean, exactly as you're saying, Tori, but I started to look at the things that I enjoyed doing and what I had already done where I could use those same experiences from babysitting, from tutoring, right? From all of those things, and to bring that into a business. And I had worked in marketing for 20 years. So I think that did help that I had the industry expertise. But what helped me to become a successful entrepreneur was actually taking all of the things that I didn't get from my 9 to 5 to apply that into building my own business. And so I think it's really really looking at who you are holistically and being able to figure out how you can apply that to a business that you'd like to start for yourself.
Soul searching.
Yeah, I think as well, like on the white space thing, I think it's about, for example, like I consume a lot of podcasts, etc., that aren't around my area of expertise or my business area. So I listen to like this podcast called Pivot, which is all about like, mainly focused on tech. I see a lot of nodding heads. So I guess everyone listens to Pivot, but so it's not like directly related to my business, but I'll often like stumble on an idea there that's coming from the tech world or from a very, very different like area to like mine, like kind of arts and culture, entrepreneurship. But that gives me an advantage. Or I'll think of something, someone loves Kara Swisher. There you go. Tori loves Kara Swisher. Yeah, same. So you do it's kind of always being open to ideas wherever they come from. And it doesn't always start with like an entrepreneurial idea or a business idea. It can just start like, you kind of like, something starts creeping into your head about, like, I don't know, recurring revenue bundles sounds like an interesting thing. Like, why don't more people do that? Like, that sounds like a good revenue stream. I wonder what else, like I started pitching it to friends around me, like who have completely irrelevant businesses that don't have a model where there's a recurring revenue model at the moment. I'm like, why don't you think about how you could do a subscriber, like, I don't know, just throw it out and like say, like, think about how this might work around your business. And it's just about being, I don't know, curious and not hyper focusing on, just reading entrepreneurship books, entrepreneurship podcasts, etc. You need to like let the world kind of come at you, and somehow something will bubble up.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Sharon, I love what you said about having a lemonade stand and being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurialism isn't this thing that happens overnight or a destination. It's kind of the little things that you do and the mindset. And I mean, I don't want this to be a therapy session or anything, but don't worry so much about what it takes to be that entrepreneur. Just be it. It's a case of, well, let's just try something. Let's do the research. How much does that cost? And like Nasri said, it's something that comes to you. And although, Sharon, like you said, and it happened with me as well, I always went proactively into what am I good at? What do I enjoy? That is really important. But to help you out, something else you can also think about is, what do you complain a lot about? Solve that problem. So.
Because chances are, if you've got that problem, other people have got that problem as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I actually started a list of exactly that. It's like, what annoyed me? And like today, my idea was, I was looking at my rug and it was all like, it got really fluffy. And I was like, oh, well, you get like these debobblers for your jumper. So like now I need to come up with a way to find a debobbler for a rug. So like, just that's a classic example. Something annoyed me in my life. And that could be, I'll throw that out there. If somebody wants to create a rug debobbler, I'll give you that one for free.
Love it.
And also, I think that's like a big problem for some people that are like in an educational, when they are following an educational career, that they are sticking to what they are specialized in, that they limit themselves like completely because they are like going and off that career. And it's like very obvious that you are doing something in that particular like industry, let's say, so that they isolate themselves from every other thought that they can have and develop. So are there like some guidelines to follow in that one, that you just like open your mind and just like start doing it? Or should you like wait till your perfect like moment and say, okay, this is the business that I want to go for? Or can you work on multiple businesses on the same time?
I think all of the above. I think what Nasri said earlier is really important. Like, you're never ready to have that kid. So, I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect time. I think now's the perfect time. Start doing the research, start looking into what it is you're interested in. And a lot of it you can do without starting, making it all legal or even putting a lot of money in. I mean, Google's free. Do the research. Figure out, does it exist? Like, does that rug bobbler exist today? Tori, did you find a rug bobbler? If it doesn't, find a manufacturer or the debobbler, find a manufacturer, see how much it costs. I mean, it might be a fun project to start. Yeah, my mind's kind of exploding with all the questions I want to ask.
I totally agree. And I think there's a few questions in the chat that kind of touch on this too, of how do you know when to test an idea? How do you know, is it worth pursuing something that already exists? And I completely agree. And maybe this is why, the three of us have pursued this route. If you listen to all three of us talk, we're just like, just do it. There's never going to be that perfect time. And there's never, actually, in some ways, there's never a wrong time either, right? Like, something might already exist and you might have the exact same idea as somebody else. But if you could just put a slight spin on that in any way, and maybe the slight spin is just because you are who you are, then that alone can be enough of a difference that could propel you ahead of your competition. And I think it's finding those points of difference. Like, even in my own business model now, we are a freelance collective. how many of those exist, right? Like anybody that has 3 friends that are freelancing can get together and say, let's form a collective. But what makes us different is not everybody has me and my 3 friends. The 4 of us make us unique versus everybody else. And so just really thinking about those things, they might not seem like a big thing, but it doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be different and unique.
I think I just wanted to add also like 2 points. There's one is like, be wary of the romanticism of like quitting everything to like become like, you don't have to quit your job. If you have a day job and you're not independently wealthy, please keep your day job until you've figured out what you're doing with the other thing, because it can be a very long time before it makes sense. So hang on to whatever's paying the rent before you kind of jump in head first. I mean, some people say like just quit everything, but I'm guessing they've already sold some shares in something and they're doing okay when they tell you to quit everything. The second thing is like an age thing. We tend to think of entrepreneurs as being young, I don't know, college dropouts. You know, we've had a lot of examples in the last few years where there's like a model of what the entrepreneur looks like and what they dress like and the hoodie and all this stuff. So like I'm 38, like I just started my first real proper like personal venture where I wasn't like an early stage employee kind of piggying back on someone else's venture at 37, so it's been a year. And I think that's actually really good. Like I made a lot of mistakes on someone else's time and money. And now I'm kind of avoiding those mistakes on my own time and money. So I learned about accounting, all the boring stuff no one likes to think about, but accounting, spreadsheets, talking to bankers, talking to funders, I learned all of that stuff with someone else and then kind of applied it, came fully formed, semi-formed to my own project. So I don't know, there's no right way to do it. And you'll probably like fumble a bit on the way. I don't think there's a lot of romanticization also of the failure. Like I don't need you to, people tell you need to fail all these times before you, no, maybe you can do great from the beginning. Like you don't need to fail or fail hard or whatever these like, things you put up on the wall say. It's great if you do great from the beginning, and it's not the end of the world if you fail. Like I think everything should be a bit more, nuanced, I think, than what we sometimes like to put out there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nasri. Don't quit your day job, please. And when I say start, and I think Sharon means this as well, like when you start it as well as what you're doing until you're ready to jump ship. I mean, my consulting business that I'm running now, I started it while I was the COO of this other firm. And once I had enough clients and knew that there was enough demand for it and all my frameworks seemed to be working, it's like, okay, I'm going to jump ship now. And I have this much runway to not care if I have any clients. And luckily that never happened, but at least I was calm enough to be able to focus on the business and not paying rent and putting food on the table.
So then you have like a calculated buffer while you are trying to pursue your business.
Yeah.
So to go further on that one, like in terms of market research and finding the product market fit, like there goes like a long time between having the business idea, having then the market research ready, and then actually like launching your own business. How do you guys think about, is there a way that you can already, so you have partially done your market research and you already start implementing like prototypes, these kinds of things without like having your market research already like completely done? Is it still possible to combine everything, or is it like you have to do your market research and exactly know what your target market is prior to developing prototypes and these kinds of things, or is there like a combinatorial approach that you can use?
I think it's romantic to think that that you would put out a product and be able to find product market fit that easily, right? So I think oftentimes true product market fit happens when you're actually rolling out the product and when it's actually happening. So I think to dial it back a little bit, the best things to do is to start small and to scale from what works. And product market fit doesn't need to be 10,000 users in a month. It can be a survey of 5 people that meet the criteria of who you think would be your ideal customer, get their feedback, show them some initial ideas that you have, iterate off of just their feedback, right? Start to Then from there, start to figure out, okay, great. So this is, I've cracked something. I recognize their needs. I created something that might interest them. Then start to play with pricing or whatever else the next step might be. Colors, pricing, flavors, right? Different sounds, depending on what you're making. And each stage is going to be yet another phase of market research. Like the product market fit exercise actually doesn't stop. And so I think it's starting small and starting where you are and just being really clear about both the product that you're launching as well as the customer that you're serving and being able to test those connections as you iterate.
100% agree with you, Sharon. That's exactly how it was. When I had my watch business, I liked the idea. I got samples from China, changed the colors and everything to what I thought based on fashion at the time. I then had all these samples in like a shoebox, and I was standing outside schools accosting teenagers, literally. And I went to malls and the food court, and I was not the cool kid. I did this in my 30s. So I wasn't the cool kid. And these teenagers who thought they were too cool for school didn't want to talk to this weirdo with an English accent in New Jersey. But I'd be like, hey, do you like this? Why do you like this? What name would you call it? These are the names I'm thinking of. How much would you pay for it? What would you do with it? And you just watch their reactions. They're like, oh, dope. No, that's useless. Why are you talking to me? Like, don't ignore that. Do not let your ego get in your way, because your ego will not serve you when people aren't buying your product. Like, you have to serve the customer, because otherwise you just don't have a business. You just don't. But yeah, hustle, speak to your client base. Just speak to your client base.
Yeah, I think research, there's like don't go in blind, but also don't over, like there's such a thing as too much information or too much research. I think at some point you just have to say, like, I've got enough that I'm not being irresponsible, but now I need to like start seeing if this actually works. I think in terms of product market fit, or even like this response to this question, but I was part of a like very early team at a almost like co-founder of a startup that was in the AVOD space, so like advertising supported streaming, and it was digitizing kind of existing catalogs of Arabic films and television, kind of from the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was building because no one had ever done that yet at the time. This is 10 years ago or something. And I realized, like, within the first couple of months, after we pitched to a few investors and stuff, I just told my co-founder, I was like, look, I think I'm out, because I wouldn't watch this. So I can't market a product that I don't understand. Like, I don't believe in what I'm saying. I mean, obviously it turned into something else later on. It's still going, it's still thriving, but I just couldn't see myself, like, I was being cynical. I was like, this is a good opportunity, but I couldn't see myself being the person who shepherded that good opportunity. So I just had to get out. And now, 10 years later, making my own content with Last 4 Productions, everything we make, I have to want to watch. Like, that's kind of, I know it's like, it's not very representative, it's not scientific or anything, but I need to see the poster and go, that's fucking cool. Like, sorry, I'm swearing, shouldn't be swearing. But, I'll see the poster and go, yeah, like, that's something that I want to watch tonight, like while I'm having dinner or whatever. So that's like your number one person you need to convince is yourself that you're doing something right. And then there's, whatever your VCs, your partners, they need to buy in, then your consumer needs to buy in. So there's a lot of layers of people who need to buy into it, but you're the first person who needs to buy into it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. My first business, that's why I left it. I mean, yes, it was cool being an entrepreneur and having my own business. I just wasn't passionate enough about the product. And having your own business is so emotionally and time taxing as it is. Don't make it harder on yourself by working on something you don't believe in, or you don't enjoy, or you don't like it. Yeah, you may as well have a 9 to 5 job.
No, makes sense. Like, there is also like a very thin line between not standing behind your product and also like falling in love with your product. And that's maybe also like the problem that many people face, that it's difficult to put their ego aside because they are like completely falling in love with their product, even though it will never work.
Yeah. When I had my watch product, so like something Nasri said, that he wants to look at the poster and say that's really cool, and I would watch that. I wouldn't wear the watch product isn't something that someone my age would wear, or someone of my fashion sense or lack of it would wear. But I knew that it was cool for that market. So I was passionate about that. And then I did make myself wear it. I made belts out of it and wore it to parties. I wore it, and I was proud of it. I wasn't the target market though, but that's okay. You don't have to be the target market as long as you believe in it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much.
So I think there's a lot of talk about, having specific skills, upskilling, and, you've got to be able to code, or you've got to be able to do wireframes, or you've got to be able to do these very specific technical, you've got to have these very specific technical skills. But I don't really hear a lot about the sort of softer skills. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on like, how important are they, thinking about presentation skills, thinking about EQ, emotional quotient. Like in my gut, I've got to think that they're equally important, because you've got to be able to communicate. But like, I'd just love to get your thoughts and take on those, and actually any examples you can give of like where that really made the difference as well, between maybe either you personally buying something or not.
I think, so a few things on that. One is being a brand marketer, which I've been for a very long time. I can tell you for sure that the emotional connection that people have with brands or companies or businesses will outlast any functional connection, right? So when you think about how much you love certain brands yourself, whether that be Apple or whether that be, other car companies, it's usually, it has nothing to do with the actual product. Like, I'm an Apple fanatic. So I've got an iPhone and I have a MacBook. And if you tried to offer me a free PC in exchange for my MacBook, I'd be like, no freaking way. Like, that's just not, can't trade that. I will never give that up. But I feel the same way about Band-Aid. I feel the same way about Tide, right? Like things that it's like, it's very functional stuff, but we as human beings have an emotional connection to certain brands and companies. And I think that as an entrepreneur, what's interesting is you are your own brand and you are representing your own company. And in my company, we're a service business. So that's where that actually resonates even more. The way that we relate to each other as colleagues and coworkers, but also the way that we relate to our clients is very soft skills based versus hard skills based. And it's often those soft skills of just that human connection that helps those relationships to survive a lot longer. And so how does that apply to other types of products and services? I would think every time you're in a room with a potential partner, every time you meet a potential investor, they're not just looking at the product that you have to offer. Many times they're looking at who you are as a person. And I think those things are highly important. It's less about perfecting your pitch or learning how to do any kind of public speaking. I think it's more about being authentic, because I think that's what truly resonates in those connections.
Yeah, actually, and on the authenticity aspect, I think a lot of people, I mean, I have friends or entrepreneurs who are like, like I took a course on how to be more emotionally aware, or all of these things. And I'm like, there's no shortcut to figuring out, how to be a better person. It's definitely going to happen in like one course. No one can coach you on it. Like my best advice is, get therapy. Like, I mean, I know it sounds like very long-winded, like a long process, etc. But really, like if you want to be, and you shouldn't do it cynically, like don't say I'm going to get therapy to be an amazing entrepreneur, because that's like a very wrong way to start that. But if you just want to be more comfortable with yourself and understand who you are and who you want to be when you're in a room with someone in front of you, and how someone can coach you on how not to cut people off, but you'll probably find out in therapy why it is you cut people off, and if you solve that or have that conversation regularly, you're less likely to do it. So I really think like when it comes to these soft skills, it's a lifelong commitment. It's not something like I need to hack this, I need to figure out how to have soft, because you can tell immediately. Like I've had people, like the way they even try to catch up with me, they're like, hey, I'm just checking in on your mental well-being. I'm like, no one talks like that. What are you talking about? You know, so I can tell that they've been told that they should check in on people regularly, and they've made a spreadsheet of people to check in on. I mean, it's a lovely gesture, but I can tell that it's not coming from somewhere completely sincere. So I think the soft skills thing that's a lifelong journey.
I agree. It's people buy from people. They don't buy from companies, even though you think they do, but people buy from people, and you are always in a position to influence the people around you. So those soft skills are more important than I think a lot of people give them credit for. Building those relationships, being a kind person, being reliable, being authentic. Think of all those good qualities. And again, like Nasri said, you can't fake those things. I had an executive client come to me the other day saying she wants to be a better leader. And she's awesome. She is a fantastic human being and a fantastic leader. And what was interesting, in my opinion, is that the only reason she didn't think she was a good leader is because she was different to everyone else, because she's been surrounded by bad leaders and she thought that's how you should be doing it. But I've coached a lot of executives and she was doing it right. And she was an authentic, awesome human being. And there was something else I was going to say about that, about the being awesome. I'll have to, I can't remember, but as Nasri was talking, I don't want to interrupt him. I will remember and I will say it in the middle of another answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think interrupt away. Oh,
sorry.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go.
Looking for a framework, and may I swear? Is it inappropriate to swear here? Okay. So I said, I can give you as many frameworks as you want, but if you're an asshole, you're always going to be an asshole. Like, there is no framework of not being an asshole. There's a framework of saying things that don't sound asshole-like, but you might still be an asshole. And people will smell that. Like Nasri said, you can see that a mile off. You really can, the fakeness. So, sorry. Thanks for letting me swear.
100%. Swear away. Yeah, no, authenticity, clearly key. So we've got like coming up to Q&A time. We've got a load of questions in the chat, which is great. Before we do that, like, keep them coming. Before we do that, I did just want to ask one more question. In terms of like leveling the playing field, you know, and making sure that as many people who want to be entrepreneurs get to be entrepreneurs, and that, you know, it's not just the phrase I heard, you know, male and pale, and everybody's coming from the same schools, they're coming from the East Coast or the West Coast of the US, you know, having diversity across every single aspect, you know, gender, ethnicity, age, any, you know, tips and suggestions on how we can better support people from different backgrounds. And there was also a question a minute ago about funding too, and, you know, that's obviously key as well. So just curious to hear your thoughts about how we might be able to open things up a bit more.
I can start if, yeah, I mean, just on the diversity side of things. So we set up Last 4 Productions with the express purpose of making Arab-led and Arab-focused film and television for the global film and television industry. So we see a lot of production happening in Latin America, in Spain, you know, obviously there's South Korea. I mean, there's a lot of very strong markets that are now having like global market access. And we just feel like a bit underrepresented as Arabs. And so I think the one thing I would say is, like, don't wait for anyone to create that space for you, because no one is going to create that space for you. So you need to be a bit like pushy and shovey and annoying. And when you create that space, make sure to bring everyone with you. So don't hog that space. Make sure you're within your own little place you've carved out. Make sure you're bringing your community with you. Make sure within that space you're not being discriminatory. You know, so we're very aware that we're 3 male founders, so our writers' room is all female. So you have to be aware of the other blind spots you might have when you're focusing on your one kind of, you know, carving out your little area.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that there are opportunities for you yourself to create opportunities for others, for sure. I also think that being proactive and seeking out opportunities where you can lean into being different sometimes helps too, right? Like, I'm a woman of color, and I'm female, and I'm a working mom. And, you know, I find all these ways to, I hate to say it, it's almost the opposite. It's like labeling yourself to be different, but it's labeling yourself to be different to find opportunities that aren't mainstream, so that it does kind of level the playing field. It's like this it's paying it forward, but also recognizing what makes you unique. One thing that I've learned about raising money, because I think this came up too in the chat, is the reason why a lot of entrepreneurs of color usually don't have or don't get funded as often, or this is what the mainstream says, is because they often aren't even part of those networks, right? So it's like old boys club, that kind of thing. Everyone knows each other. You go to certain schools, you automatically kind of get into this legacy of this network of investors and other things. And so it's looking at those bigger players and trying to either find initiatives that might be carved out for someone just like you, or knocking on those doors and saying, listen, I am not like you, but I've got this great idea. And if we were to partner together, this is actually just going to kind of help you more, because those types of, all organizations now are looking to diversify their resources, diversify their own income streams, diversify partnerships. And rather than waiting for that to come to you or for that to be created, just go off, just tell, like, you know, I'm a 41-year-old mom of 2. I've done this, this, and this. I'm a woman of color. Like, I check all these boxes. Just accept me into this program, right? Give me this grant, give me this funding, because it's just leaning into your strengths by pointing out what makes you unique in those ways.
Sharon, I loved what you shared about that and knocking on those doors to say, hey, state the obvious. Hey, I am different to you and from you. And this is why that's a good thing. That's exactly what you should do. And I have a quick analogy. When I moved to New York 13, 14 years ago, I was like, oh, I don't know anyone. I don't have any friends. But rather than sitting there waiting to get invited to a party, I just kept creating my own, inviting everyone else. The same applies to the job market, the entrepreneurial market. Like, own who you are and own what you want. Do not ask for permission. Do not wait for an opportunity. Make it yourself now.
That's actually,
couldn't agree more.
we will remember that one. Definitely. So also further, maybe like some questions from the audience as well. So the first question that
Can I just say one thing on funding? Because I know, like, I'm honestly don't have the chat open because I can't focus on the chat and all your faces. I'd rather focus on your faces. But I did see the word funding pop up. Just one thing with funding is it seems to be this thing everyone's obsessed with when it comes to entrepreneurship. And there's this weird kind of arms race around funding rounds and, you know, like VC, and it's like kind of beautifully spoofed in stuff like Silicon Valley and whatever, you know, like the whole VC world. I think if, you know, you should try to be as self-sustainable as possible as a business. You should be able to like be getting cash from your clients rather than your investors for as long as possible. You should try to get low interest loans if possible. You should, you know, like you should like this, you know, this rush to get other people involved in your business. I mean, I've seen it implode. Like, you know, I was at a company, this is where I was like a current early employee. We raised $1 million, then we raised 5, then we raised 15, and we were raising like a 30 million round. And that's where everything kind of imploded. So like actually all that money kind of destroyed the natural organic growth of the company, and it messed up. People sometimes aren't ready to receive that kind of money. Like maybe the product's doing well, etc., but the management team isn't quite there in terms of like knowing how to manage this money properly. Like, so I think you should really be focused on, you know, starting small, building organically, because I think our minds have been corrupted by, we see these numbers like these people got 50 million, these people got 100. I don't think that's the right way to be thinking about this. I mean, obviously I'm sure it's lovely to get that, but I think if your product is, or your company is doing well, and you're growing in the right way, you'll know at which point you have the leverage as well to go ask for funding. Like you're in a strong enough position to get that funding on the right terms and not have someone kind of abuse your lack of experience, etc. So I would say like hold off on external funding for as long as humanly possible. And, you know, like I said, try and get it from your clients.
Yeah, that thing you said, Nasri, about the 50 million, I'm sure that's lovely. I can't think of anything worse than the pressure of having those investors be like, what have you done? What have you done? What have you done? Now what's next? Get it from your clients. I mean, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs because they want to be their own bosses. And I don't know about the people on this call, but having an investor, that's your boss. Do you really want another boss? Make it self-funding and start small, like Sharon said and Nasri said. I would question your motivation about wanting to be an entrepreneur. Do you want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg? Do you want to be famous? Do you want to be rich? Or do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because that isn't the only definition of entrepreneurship, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks of this world. It isn't. It's the 1% of the 1%.
And isn't that also like a bit the problem, that finding funding is like a very mechanical process, that it isn't always based on like the personality of a company? So actually it needs to be like more like a process that they can relate to. If you search like funding, that you have someone on board that really like accepts your values rather than making them like their own because they give you money.
That's another thing about people who come into your company, is like you need to make sure you're aligned into, you know, because you have a vision for what you're doing. Yeah. You have a vision of how, you know, some entrepreneurs want to stay entrepreneurs of that, you know, owners of that one company for the rest of their life. You know, it's something very personal. They want to keep building it until the day they die. Some people want to exit in 5 years. Some people want to exit in 10 years, whatever it is, you know. So some people want to sell and stay on as executive chairman, whatever. There's a million options. And you need to make sure that the people who are giving you money, or not giving you, the people who are investing in you, have similar goals. Because if you have goals that are diverging, then you get into like, you know, debates at the boardroom level, which are really impacting you. You're spending time away from the business. And that's when the business starts to suffer, when you're having these endless debates with your VC about, you know, realigning priorities, etc. I think it's the earlier you can make sure that you have very, very similar ideas about where this is all going. I think that's like makes for a healthier relationship.
Very helpful. Maybe like a second question that we saw in the chat also was, have you guys some advice on how to stay like motivated on the more boring things to do, like bureaucratic essentials, taxes, registering from companies, actually everything that hasn't anything to do with like the core like values of the company itself?
Yeah, my best advice for that would be find someone who's really good at it and be willing to spend the money to pay that person, right? So hire a lawyer to help you to establish the LLC. Please don't try to do it yourself. Same thing with things like accounting and finance. As soon as you get big enough where you can start to outsource that to someone who's an expert at those things, have them run it for you, because one is, it is boring, but secondly, it keeps you safe. Like, you know, my first year in business, I was literally Venmoing and PayPaling the consultants that I was working with. And that was all fun and games, and that's just kind of how it was. But, you know, when Fiverr came knocking on our doors for acquisition, I had to go through a really rough due diligence process of all the PayPals and all of the Venmos that I had sent to all of these people and put them onto spreadsheets that didn't exist before that moment. And so as soon as you can find the experts to help get those things in order, the easier it'll be as you get bigger. And you'll probably actually get bigger faster with the experts helping you to set those things in place.
You will. One of the analogies I have when I'm helping clients on that one is outsource if you can. Don't try and do it yourself. Don't look at the cost of outsourcing. Look at the cost of not outsourcing. How much are you not spending time on your business because you're doing those boring things? And the analogy is, you might have the best train engine in the best train car in the world. Who cares if there's no track to put it on to get it to its end destination? Those tracks have to be in place. And that's one of the things I'm actually really passionate about when I work with founders, is getting that foundation ready, getting it there, making sure everything's organized, making sure you know what your skills are and what you're missing and who you need to hire, who it's going to be, even the details of what you should file and how you should name those files, so you don't spend 3 hours looking for it and delay a proposal you could have sent out. I mean, I'm all about getting you organized at the beginning, and whoever you work with, whatever you do, even if we never speak again, be organized from the very, very, very beginning, and outsource to professionals to stay safe. It's too expensive not to.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I would even say, like, when you're kind of having your beauty contest with your co-founder, you know, like if you're trying to figure out who's a good co-founder, I would say, like, have complementary skills, because if both of you hate admin and both of you hate details, you're headed straight for a brick wall. Like, there's at least one of you has to love a spreadsheet, you know, because you do have to somehow start enjoying, like, I've kind of weirdly, after all these years, started to enjoy the process of, you know, making sure all the admin's right and making sure the company's registered in the best place possible for what we're doing in this, you know. And it's stuff that might seem boring at first, but in a weird way, you kind of find what's exciting, especially if you're excited about your business. This stuff starts to get exciting because it helps your business. So you start to find everything exciting. And yeah, naming conventions. That was one of the first things we talked about as founders, is how do we title email subjects to make sure nothing gets missed? I mean, you know, sounds super boring, but it's very important.
Productive. And you'll get to where you want to go much quicker if you're organized and productive.
Love that. You actually started talking there, Nasri, about co-founders, and somebody's actually asking about that. Like, how do you find one? You know, I think everybody's like, oh yeah, am I co-founder this? Am I co-founder that? But like, any tips on how to go about finding somebody, especially if it's somebody with very different skills, and so is maybe like outside of your network? And I think this is a classic, isn't it? It's like, how do I find a tech co-founder? How do I find a marketing co-founder? Like, any thoughts or suggestions that anybody can share on that point?
Happy to go ahead. I think, well, I definitely think I would personally say you can't do anything in life alone. So I'm very pro having co-founders, you know, like, you need someone with you. It's going to be very difficult. Sometimes you're not going to be up to it. You need someone else who can, like, pick up the slack. You need to be there. I don't know. I just believe that the chances of success are much higher if you're with a co-founder. In terms of finding that co-founder, like, I mean, I did it, like, and one of the ways which I think I've seen a lot around me, which is kind of, it's social, it's someone you kind of already know. Preferably it's someone you're kind of semi-friends with, not too close with. You know, I don't know, it's a weird, I don't know, it's like, it's not a hard science, but I would say it's someone, I think it's like any relationship, you have to, you know, you have to value that person. You have to admire what they're doing and what they've done. You have to have a healthy framework for disagreeing with them. And you have to have a healthy framework for coming back from a non-healthy disagreement. So you will shout at you will have a moment when you don't talk to each other properly, and you have to have a way to come back from that. So it's like any relationship, really. And the problem with relationships is, you know, we only have a handful of deep, meaningful ones in our life. And this is probably one of them. So there's no magic. I think it's like what I was saying earlier. It's like, you just have to be open all the time. You know, like, you have to be open to this. So you're like mentally available when that person presents themselves, so you can kind of see it click in your head. I think, I know these aren't like very satisfying answers because they're all like a bit wishy-washy, but like, for me anyway, that's what's worked.
Paru, did you want to go?
Sure, thank you. With the co-founders, I would say I wouldn't always, or actually, what I would, don't wait until you found the perfect co-founder to start. It's a bit like the party thing I said about being in New York, where start it so the co-founder knows what they're coming to, rather than, hey, I've had this idea and what do you think? And it will slow you down. So start, so you have a message for them and say, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. Are you on board? Do you have any ideas? Would you change that? And it's a really nice way to figure out whether they are the right co-founder for you, because you've already started the wheels in motion with what your vision is and what you want for the business. So, and what Nasri said earlier, start it and they will come. And it's not, well, it's not that the clients will just come, there's branding, there's marketing, there's all this work to do, but there needs to be something for someone to look at and come to, not just an idea.
I would also question why you need a co-founder, right? Like a co-founder isn't always necessary. If you feel as if your own skill set is within these 3 areas and you need help with 2 other areas, the other ways to build your business might be to create an advisory board of people with those complementary skill sets. And maybe if you're comfortable with it, giving them a certain percentage of equity in your company so that they are just as, well, maybe not just as invested as you are, but they get a little bit of the pie to be motivated in your success. Another thing to think about might be to hire a management team with some of those complementary skill sets. Like I have a head of finance because, as you know, I was Venmoing and PayPaling people. Definitely needed someone to look over money. I have a head of operations because that's never been in my background. And that was a class that I nearly failed in business school, to be honest. And then I have a head of client services, which I am very good at. But the reason why I have someone in that role now is because I need to start thinking about a successor, right? So as you grow your businesses, in the beginning, it might feel like having a co-founder would help to offset some of the load, which it might, but that person doesn't have to be literally co-founder in title. You can find other people that can fulfill the role that you need to be filled while you're still growing your business.
Yeah, this is my 4th business, and the one that was the biggest failure was the one where I had a co-founder. And the others I was on my own. But I agree with Nasri, you can't do it alone, but it doesn't always have to be in a co-founder position. Unless, I have to say, if you are looking for VCs, very rarely do VCs invest in single owner ventures. Like it's so rare. Yeah, wanted to share that.
And when you do pursue with a co-founder, like in every healthy relationship, you have like some boundaries, and everyone is scared to have like a divorce of some kind. At what time do you start like discussing legal entities and these kind of things? Because like having good agreements makes like good friends. I think. Like, is it like a moment when you start like creating these kind of boundaries?
I would think it would start the moment that the person agrees that they're interested in that relationship. And then naturally that those discussions become codified in a document. That's my advice.
I would say early on as well, but not so early that it kills the venture getting off the ground. I would say in the first couple of months as you're doing it, because you need some live examples of the issues that might come up. I'm coaching 2 co-founders at the moment, and I'm playing mediator without that title, but I'm playing mediator, and I'm asking them all the hard questions that they're too embarrassed to ask themselves because they don't want to offend the other person. So one of them said in this meeting, well, oh, I'd like to do this, this, and this. And I asked the other person, well, are you okay with that? She's like, great. Well, will you be okay with it if she doesn't follow through with that? She's like, no. I said, well, we need to put that in writing. What would the steps be to overcome that? It's like, oh, but she won't fail on it. I'm like, what if her husband gets in an accident and then she just can't put any time into the business or money for 6 months? How will you feel then? She's like, oh, like you need to put it in writing. And I'm a strong advocate of having everything so explicitly clear. Think of the worst case scenario at the beginning. It is like a prenup for a marriage. Think of the worst case scenario so that you're never worried about, so you have that to fall back on, and you're never worried about, oh, well, can I do this and what will happen? You'll be very clear that if you do that, that will happen because you discussed it at the beginning. So yeah, early on for sure, but as I would wait a couple of months because then you've got the experience for the examples to put into that document.
I think there's also like a cultural component. In some cultures, it's a bit more, it's almost rude to want to put it down on paper. So like, obviously I'm Lebanese, so there's a very Mediterranean approach to it, which is, oh, we know each other, we trust each other. There's no real reason to put it down, which I don't subscribe to, by the way. So there is that. You kind of, depending on who your co-founder is or where they're from, there could also be a bit of a dance around it to make sure that it's not perceived as being, you not trusting them, that like it's just, this is good business practice. And so, yeah.
Nasri, I would question if that ever happened. I would question whether they'd be the right co-founder if your values are different.
Yeah, but it's almost like I have this with one of my co-founders where, you know, I mean, it's not that he's like would refuse to
There's
sign
no right or wrong.
it just wouldn't be his first thought. He's just like more trusting because of where we come from, all of us. Whereas I'm more like, yeah, but I'm also trusting, but I would just rather there be a piece of paper for all of us, including if I do something completely like off the charts, you know, like, so I think, but I do think it's like nice to like just factor in the fact that it might not be the same. Like in the US, people sign agreements over every single interaction, you know, like people, you know, I don't know, sorry, not to generalize about the US, but there is that culture of, you know, like delimiting things, making sure everyone's on the same page, etc. It probably exists a bit less in more informal cultures, like around the Mediterranean or in Africa, or, you know, so just like good to keep in mind.
So yeah, like obviously this is like a difficult topic because there is like a thin line of like crossing it or pushing it a bit too far. And this is also something that came from the chat. Like, does this include in the 3 biggest mistakes you see early entrepreneurs make? Like, and do you have like any suggestions, or what are these 3 biggest mistakes that you guys think, and how to avoid them? Obviously.
That's really hard. I think one area that I failed at for a different business that I had co-founded was not paying enough attention to money. Meaning we were so focused on mission and purpose and things that we were creating, and we really weren't thinking about the financial viability of what we were doing. Like we weren't thinking about revenue streams quite as much as we should. We weren't planning for rainy days. And sometimes I think folks that tend to be entrepreneurial, we're dreamers, right? So we're, you know, a lot of the reason why we are doing this is not because of money. And so it's easy in those beginning phases to forget the real purpose of a business, which is for the most part to make money. And so I think that was definitely one of my biggest mistakes with some of my earlier companies, of just not finding a way to make it sustainable financially, and then eventually having to completely pivot or shut it down.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, oh, sorry, go on, Paru.
I'd say one of my biggest mistakes was calculating pricing wrong and wrongly assuming certain costs and overheads. And it was clear after about a year that, because you can never put your price up. Well, you can, but it's tough. It's easier to put your price down or discount your price. But so we had taken a UK-based product and service and tried to roll it out in the US, and it was successful up to a certain point, but shipping was a lot more expensive in the US than it was in the UK. Taxes were different. There were a lot more middlemen in the US than there were in the UK, and you lose money each bit. And at the end, I decided to give that business up because it just wasn't worth the lifestyle or the hassle, because I would have had to have sold so much of that product to break even and make money had I done the research in the first place. So now, again, one of the things I coach people on, especially product-based things, is don't price it based on how much it's costing you today and you shipping it from your spare bedroom. Look at what that cost is, and then look at the cost of having a third-party packing warehouse or owning your own warehouse and doing all of that. And whichever the highest cost is, base your pricing off that, and then you'll get to profit more in the times where the cost isn't that high. But yeah, don't just think, oh yeah, I can sell this for $50, when you scale, your price is going to have to go up, because again, that's bad for your brand as well. So pricing.
That's thinking about future proofing as well, isn't it? And trying to think a bit more long term there. Okay, fantastic. Well, one more question, and then I think we're going to have to call it quits. So let's do this last one. Well, actually, I guess there's 2. Let's do the penultimate one as like a bit of a speed round. Just to share, throw out any resources that you would recommend. It could be books, I don't know, websites, podcasts. We've already spoken about Pivot, so that's in the chat. Anything else?
Actually,
Donald,
oh,
sorry, go ahead, Nasri. You go.
I was actually going to recommend another pivot related thing, which is Scott Galloway, who presents, one of the co-presenters, co-hosts of Pivot, has a book called The Algebra of Happiness, which I find very, because I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't read like books on entrepreneurship. I would read books on like what it is you actually want out of life, which again sounds very wishy-washy, but I guess that's who I am. We're figuring out my brand here, but it's because that's really going to be the basis of what you build everything on. And I think, and again, I know this isn't very useful, but the resources that are going to be most useful for you are the ones that aren't directly related to your business. Like they're the ones that are going to give you something that, you know, help you figure something out about life that'll then feed into your business. But the ones about the business are going to be, you know, like how to keep your cash flow clean and like all this kind of stuff, which is very, very important. But they're not where you're going to get like any massive eureka moments.
Yeah, and the two things I would like to recommend is Simon Sinek's 18-minute TED Talk from like 15 years ago about the Golden Circle, and the Golden Circle, Simon Sinek, if you Google that, it's about 18 minutes long, about your why and how doing it all from your why. And the second one is Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. It's a great way of cutting through the crap and just being like, okay, this is your problem. This is why it's not okay. And this is what you need to do about it. And this is how I can help. It will help you with your pitch decks. It will help you with your sales decks. It will help you with your elevator pitch. And it will help you understand why you're even doing it, because it questions so much. And if you have any questions on that, I know it inside out, just email me or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great. I love those two things too, the ones that Paru just mentioned. My two would be Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, former founder of Zappos, who recently just passed away, unfortunately. He's a legend. And I think that that whole book and all of the case studies written about it is such a great entrepreneur's roadmap into customer service, but also how you can build a team to be fully empowered to provide amazing experiences. And then the other book, this is more practical and kind of what Nasri was talking about, but Profit First, which is a book that I read that really helped me to change my mindset on how to build a business model that would be super profitable and scalable. And, you know, it was acquired by a public company. So there you go. So I think that's a good proof point that using a model like that has worked.
Fantastic. Well, I'm trying to share as many of those as I can in the chat. Hopefully people were taking notes, and obviously we'll share the video too, so you can go back and record that. So last question for everybody, and we're basically at time. So let's run through this, but it's like, how can people contact you? Like, or how can people continue your stories, and what's your social handles or the best way to find out more?
I'm happy to put my email in here because it's in the chat. It's not going to go out to everyone who watches the video, right? It's just the people in the chat. Or will it go out? I
think so.
I'm happy to hand out my email. I'll tell you what, connect with me on LinkedIn. There's not any other Paru Radia out there, so find me. But do me a favor and write a message when you connect with me, because if I think you're trying to sell me something, I'm going to say no.
I mean, that in itself is a great tip. Everybody should be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same, LinkedIn. I'm the only Sharon Lee Thoney on LinkedIn. I think there might be a fake profile of mine, to be honest, but I'm the one with the real people on it. So find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on every platform known to man, sadly, but I think probably Twitter and Instagram are the best places to catch me.
Fantastic. Gotta love social media. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, Nasri, Paru. It's been great to kick things off. We had like so many people. I think we were nearly 50 people online at the end. So that was fantastic. For people who want to join our next event, February the 18th, we're going to have a general networking, bit of a hackathon to help plan your first 30, 90 days. And all of this is going to be leading up to a big event at the end of June, which is a live pitch competition. So we're going to be running a series of different events to try and help out, practice sessions, marketing tips, etc., etc. So keep an eye out for all of those in the coming weeks. Don't forget, again, to follow us on social media. I'll just put that into the chat quickly. Lots of people saying thank you for those who haven't got chat open as well. And so, yeah, so thank you very much. It's been a fantastic hour and a half, and let's hope we can continue the conversation on LinkedIn or wherever it might be in the future.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.